Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Epic Heathen Podcast. That was Sasan's reinterpretation of Varjojen virta. As you probably know, Hävitetty as an album deals with the end of the world, although it doesn't really explain why the world is ending or has ended. It's just the end of the world. So, because interpretation is quite open, Sasan chose to interpret it as war, and he used battle sounds, which, yes, Moonsorrow had used battle sounds in the past, but certainly not 21st century battle sounds. So, yep, Sasan decided to be original in this regard. Well, before the episode starts, I would like to mention the book which is coming up about Moonsorrow. It has a title, it's called Home of the Waves, Conversations with Moonsorrow, and it's going to come out through the British publisher Cult Never Dies. We don't have a date yet. Currently, we are in the process of reviewing. It has been sent back and forth with different corrections and things like this. So, yeah, it's coming out later this year. We still don't know when. So, keep an eye open. Obviously, as things happen, I will inform about it here on the podcast, on the Facebook page, etc. You can already follow the Facebook page for the book. It's facebook.com/moonsorrowbook. Super easy, yeah? facebook.com/moonsorrowbook. Check it out. Alright, as for Hävitetty, which is today's topic, this is Moonsorrow's fifth album, as you already know. It has 2 songs, which are very long, half an hour each, and it's the closest it got to a Henry Sorvali solo album. The album was written mostly by him. Obviously, the lyrics, as usual, were written by Ville, but the music was mostly Henry, and mostly on his own. It was also a very difficult moment in Henry's life due to personal issues, family issues that he had at the time. He was going through lots of problems, and well, I guess it can be heard in the album that it's a very dense, very difficult one. We again managed to talk for a very long time about it. This episode is only about one song, the first one. Okay, it's not true that it's only about one song, because first we spoke at length about the album as a total. All of us have pretty strong feelings about it, and we commented a lot on that. We all wanted to give our take on it. But then, yeah, we spoke, after talking about the album in general, we spoke about the first song. And when we finished the first song, we realized it was way too long already, so we left the second one for another day. And it will be also the next episode, yeah? So this episode will be the album in general and the first song. We had some problems. Basically, you will hear very soon that Sasan, who usually has the best sound, today has the worst, because he didn't have his usual microphone with himself. Aleksi from Finland at some point disappeared from the conversation, and then reappeared, and then disappeared again. And this was due to power outages. And as for the recording, I did something wrong, and I don't have the multi-tracks. Usually I have separate tracks, one per speaker. This time I didn't get that. I only got one general track and nothing else, which means that when people talk over each other, I couldn't separate those parts, but hopefully it won't be too bad, honestly. Yeah, well, and in the beginning I couldn't hear everybody, and we repeated the initial welcomes and hello several times. You will hear lots of laughing. This is because we were saying hello for the upteenth time. Okay, that's enough blah 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 blah. Enjoy the episode. Today we're going to talk about Hävitetty, and I'm really curious how this is going to turn out, because on the one hand it's just 2 songs, on the other hand they are really long. Everybody's here. So in order of appearance in my screen, we have Sasan from New York. Hello, Sasan.
Hello, how are you? I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Okay, glad to hear that. Francesco from Italy, how are you?
Greater than Sasan, probably.
Thomas from Angoulême, l'Hexagone français, how are you?
Je vais super bien. Hashtag I'm doing great.
Perfect. Mikkel from Denmark, somewhere else than usual, but still Denmark. How are you? And where are you? I forgot.
I'm in Northern Zealand, the land of Hamlet, and also the city of Hamlet. So in Elsinore, and I'm doing much better than Sasan because it's Friday evening here and not Friday morning.
Okay, well, it's like afternoon in New York,
It's
isn't it?
1:30. I'll start drinking.
Oh yeah, 1:30.
You should.
Sure.
I don't have anything else going on today.
And Aleksi from Finland, how are you?
I am very tired. I have basically just woken up, and whatever we're doing today, I haven't had any time to look into it.
Yeah, well, it will be fine. You will catch up. It's a podcast about Moonsorrow. All right, so as usual, let's talk each of us what we think about this album. And today I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to start because this album is basically the reason why this podcast exists.
Yeah,
to begin with. No, the thing is that with this album, I discovered Moonsorrow, but I also discovered extreme metal. So I was the type of person who would only listen to Iron Maiden, Halloween, whatever, power metal and stuff like this. Any vocals which were not clean, I would immediately stop playing and forget about it. Then, well, the in-between actually was Winterson. I heard a Winterson song. I liked it. I felt super open-minded. I thought it was black metal for some reason. And soon after that, I found an album with 2 songs, which at first I thought it was a single. It turned out not to be a single. I then saw that they were very long songs. I was never afraid of that because I liked some Pink Floyd or some whatever long stuff. So, but when I listened to it that night in bed, I was totally blown away because I didn't know that that kind of music even existed. I thought everything with harsh vocals was like brutal death metal or whatever, very noisy, and I didn't know that this kind of thing with melodies and atmospheres and everything could exist. So that was a turning point. And well, probably I don't exaggerate a lot if I say that it was a turning point in my life, because then it was a new huge hobby, and I spent so much time. I dedicated to so much time to Moonsorrow, to listening, to writing about them, to interviewing them, to now doing a podcast. So basically, yeah, that album is the reason this podcast exists, if we stretch it a bit. So what do you guys think about it? Tell me, Sasan, you're the first on my screen still.
Yeah, this was the first Moonsorrow album that came out when I was already listening to Moonsorrow like a little bit. I was 15, I guess, probably at the time, 14 or something, and I'd gotten into heavier stuff. A lot of the Finnish metal scene at that time had made its way to me. Korpiklani and Seferum, Winter Sun, and this was actually no, I was like 16. This is 2007. No. Yeah, so I've been listening to that stuff. I was playing music at this point, and this was the first Moonsorrow album that came out that I was waiting for. I was already a Moonsorrow fan at this point because of Rizaket. And I similarly had a very transformative experience with it. Musically, it was metal and was heavy and was all of the stuff that I'd been into, but it also brought back a lot of music that I'd grown up with that I hadn't really been listening to very much. My dad put on a lot of Pink Floyd growing up, especially the Wish You Were Here album, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is something I'm going to talk a lot about today. And just this sort of long form, more progressive-y thing wasn't really something I was doing at that time as far as what I was actively listening to. But this sort of brought that back into my life and was a combination of music that had left a big impression on me growing up and the things that I was listening to then. But also, I don't know, it came at a time in my life where it just really emotionally resonated with me. And as I've gotten older and grown up, I feel like the album has grown up with me. And there's still the moments in there that really impacted me growing up, but also new things that I'm discovering or noticing or caring more about. And even just listening for this discussion, I feel like because I have grown as a musician and make my own music now and have ways that I try to approach things, I'm noticing things in the album that were there all along, but I'm noticing now for the first time, and I'm wondering whether this was the inspiration or whether it is a coincidence or what. But this is for my entire life, basically, since I was 16. The album that I've said is my favorite album. It's the reason why I've said Moonsorrow is my favorite band. And the second song is my favorite song. And so sort of basically from the first listen, it's just been oh, okay, this is my taste in music now. And so very happy to be talking about it today.
Nice. Francesco, what about you?
Well, I think I started to listen to Moonsorrow after this album came out, but at the time I didn't have internet, I didn't have a credit card, and so on. And so I knew that this album existed, but I didn't have it. So I listened the earlier albums before because people borrowed some stuff, and so I just had the Suden Uni, the Kiven Kantaya album, but I didn't have this one. When Tulimirski came out, I listened to that, skipping this Hävitetty album, and so my first contact with this album came after listening to Tulimirski, and it was natural to me to make a comparison because of the long songs in it. But and at the time, I believed that it was similar stuff. Yeah, they are both long, but I think now, after listening to it so many times over the years, there are different formulas, and I think you agree on that. But yeah, I think Hävitetty is a very complex one, and if I could describe it, I'd use the picture of a dark cloud moving towards you. Yeah, and I also like to listen to this album while driving at night or with a cloudy sky above, because it gives the atmosphere, the right feelings of this situation, I think. But it is very hard to describe, to analyze. I think it is the hardest Moonsorrow album from this point of view.
I like the analogy with the cloud. Thomas, tell us something about Hävitetty.
Okay, I'm really disappointed because Francesco stole my analogy with the clouds. But I think I'm still the youngest in the group here. We'll be 26 in a few days. But the first album of Moonsorrow I listened for its release was Varjojen, and it was a blast. It got me into Moonsorrow really, really hard. And when I discovered this album a couple of weeks after, it was like Sasan. I was raised by my father with Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here. So for me, this album has two great stuff: the perfect balance between good emotions of like fighting in a way and darkness. And for me, it's the pinnacle of kind of depressive black metal. We have a huge scene in France of called DSBM, depressive pseudo black metal, and none of the bands, in my opinion, arrive to that point where this album is, in terms of it's a shitty situation, but you can make the best of it, and you have some like light, good thoughts in darkness. So I really enjoy the mood of the album. Secondly, it's also an album I really enjoy to have on the road while driving, because it's like just the highway of black metal. Like, you just put it on and you are driving hundreds of miles listening to it. It's amazing. And there is also one more stuff that I want to talk about. It's, for me, the production of the album in terms of sound is amazing. I was listening to it again at 7:30 in the morning before going to work, and just to warm up my ears. Everything is so nicely put together. Everything sounds so nice. The recording is amazing. For me, it's a masterpiece of musical recording and mixing. It's just great, but depressive, but great.
When we finish this round of opinion on the album, the first thing we will talk about will be the production. Mikkel, tell us, please.
Yeah, I'm so happy I'm not the first one to get this question, because I've probably dreaded this day since we started this podcast. Because this is the album that you would think that you could say the most about, but it's also the album that I can say the least about, because it's just, there's nothing to pinpoint anywhere in the album where there's like, I don't like this. There's this thing I've always wondered about. Everything just throws completely through this audio soundscape straight into my brain. And it's the same with me. I've grown up with Pink Floyd as well from my father, and this is the epitome of active listening music, and especially for the highway. And fuck, it's such a hard one to talk about, because fuck, I am at a loss for words because of this album. It's really tough.
Did you already know Moonsorrow when it came out?
No. For me, it was in 2000, 11. Then I found Moonsorrow, so way past. So for
Aleksi,
me, the
what
first
about?
one was
Sorry.
Jumalten Aika was the first one for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
That was already a long time ago now, though.
Yeah, fuck. It seems like forever ago already.
Aleksi, what about you? Well, in your case, you already knew the band for quite a few years, right?
Correct.
And
But
what did you think of it?
I mean, funnily enough, like I don't know how many times I've heard the album. I've listened to it a lot, but it's one of those albums, especially, well, as we know, like half an hour songs, two of them. And especially nowadays, like as I have got like a better audio equipment and such, like if I focus and listen to it, I just pick new things I hear from the song almost every time I listen to it. Like it's still like a very mysterious like entity. Like it's like I don't know it that well, I would say. Even like there's still new things to learn about it. I'm sure like all of you have kind of know points of the song that I haven't really paid attention to, or songs rather. But it's, yeah, I love the album, but it's also a bit less consumed on my end because, well, if I went to school, to uni, well, that's half an hour. I would only have time to listen to one song, so it's can't really fully commit to the album that often.
Yeah, I agree that also in my case, I don't listen to it that often or any often at all because it's so demanding. It's not something I would like to play at home while I'm doing something else. When I listen to it, it's usually in bed and that's it. Probably the others can say something similar, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's my favorite album, and I think that makes it a little bit precious to me. I really loved what Aleksi said about it being this sort of like mysterious thing, and I definitely agree with that. That it feels like it has a life of its own outside of just like, oh, a guy sat down and thought of some melodies, and then a few other people got together and they all played it. It feels like it's this separate thing that got channeled through some people a little bit, and that you kind of get glimpses of. And I really only listen to the album once a year, once every other year for a long time. So as opposed to something like Hävitetty, which I would, especially growing up, would just throw on all the time.
Yeah, but also kind of want to like what Thomas said, like kind of the just more in a sense like how the album feels like towards the depressive side. Like that's something that speaks a lot to me as well. So it's like it's not even like just a kind of slower melodies and just vocals, and it's just a very, very good like combination of things that makes the like it's just a remarkable album.
If I sorry, Sasan, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say that I know Abel wants to talk about the production, but I think we could have a section at some point where we just talk about that aspect, just the mood of the album.
Yeah.
I would love to.
I had really one last thing to add. Sorry, that kind of brings everything that you guys told us for now. I was writing notes this morning for the recording, and I wrote two stuff. The first one is I'm a huge fan of The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien in general. And for me, this album of Moonsorrow is my precious. It's like I can't fully understand it. It brings back a lot of stuff from the past, and it really has a deep like connection towards me. Like it's my master. I'm not a huge fan of black metal. I'm a heavy and death metal guy. This album is the album to rule them all. It's there is so much cleverness and like I have the word in French, but I can't find the equivalent in English. But it's a masterpiece. Like it everything is so cleverly assembled. Like every influence we talk about with Henri a few months ago, Pink Floyd, Bathory, even the like more folky elements are like used, but used in a way to bring the album to a complete how can I say that? Sorry.
Balance.
Yeah, balance totally. And this is why for me this album is the one I listen the most, the least. But when I'm listening to it, I can't do my dishes while listening to this album. I'm going to put some stuff I know completely right. But this one I have to sit on my chair with a tea or a beer, and just I have to be present from the first second to the last one. This one is an adventure, and it's demanding, but it's engaging also, and this one is the best.
Yeah, it's if there's any album I would ever accept as being the best on earth, this would be a happy contender, and I would be more than happy if this is the only album I could listen to for the rest of my life. And because it's demanding, but it's also probably the most rewarding Moonsorrow album, without a doubt. There's not a single note that sounds forced in this production. Everything just flows perfectly together.
I really enjoy the word rewarding. That's completely that. If you are into it, you will be the king of the world.
Yeah, I mean, the last 5 minutes of the album, you're just in a total despair of like, okay, holy shit, what the hell, right? And it doesn't matter how many times you've listened to it; it's always gonna blow you away.
Every time that we have an episode to record, 1 or 2 days earlier, I listen to the album, taking notes, like stopping all the time and taking lots of notes. And with this one, it felt so weird to analyze it in that way. That didn't happen with the previous ones, not even with Verisake. But with, I don't know, I felt like I was kind of betraying it in a way, or but it really felt weird. Maybe not betraying is not the right word. It's a bit stupid what I said. But yeah, it's like watching it from a distance. So it's usually very atmospheric, getting very much into it. And like watching it from a distance felt really strange, really strange. As if it was a different thing.
Yeah, I'm happy I'm not a reviewer. This album, and probably like Wish You Were Here or Dark Side of the Moon, it's probably the worst albums to review ever, because you cannot do the active listening if you're really reviewing it. You have to do some kind of objective something when you're actually doing the review, and it's simply not possible here, because in some way it's gonna get a really subjective opinion from you, and then you're biased, and then the review is not really worth anything.
There's a couple people who make things that I'm interested in. So there's a filmmaker, Charlie Kaufman. He made a few really good movies. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or Synecdoche, New York adaptation. He has talked about this concept, and then also this video game designer named Jonathan Blow. Yeah, there you go. Tomas knows him. Has also talked about this concept, and it's this idea that like the art that they make is about they see this thing, and it's not something that they can put into words or that they understand themselves. All they can really do is try to capture some aspect of it that makes them feel that way, and then show it to other people and hope that it also makes them, that they recognize it, like, oh, yes, me too, like I know what you're talking about. And I've always really gotten that impression from this album. I mean, it's been one of the biggest instances of that in my life. And when Jonathan Blow's talking about that, he made this game called The Witness. It's about like just this idea of knowing things that you can't express in words. So the game's all about puzzles and whatever, but the whole point is that it's about exploring this idea that you like get information sent to you and you understand it, but it never involves language. And if you tried to explain it using language, you wouldn't know how. And I think one of the things about this album is that you just get such a strong sense that somebody was feeling something, and this is what that feeling was like. It doesn't feel like somebody sat down and made decisions about what they should do next, or what should this song do next. And I think when they talked about the writing of the album to the degree that they have, they said like, we started writing a song and it just became 30 minutes long. Francesco talked about how the structures of the formulas of this and Tulomirsky feel different, and I think that kind of shows. I think in Tulomirsky it's like in sections, and it's like, okay, we're gonna make this big epic song. This just kind of feels like this feeling, this thing was there, and they just tried to convey it, and this feeling was the thing that dictated what should happen next and what it should sound like. And maybe I think that's why we connect with it so quickly, but also why it feels so strange or dirty to try to put it into decipher or put it into language, because that's not really how we experience it. I personally also, have dealt with a lot of depression stuff, but I am not super in touch with my emotions. Like, I have a hard time like knowing how I feel. Like, oh, I am feeling sad right now. I am feeling angry. I have a very and I've, therapy, I'm learning and whatever, trying to put words to it. But I also make music, and like I was showing something to my girlfriend a couple days ago, and she was like, "What were you feeling when you wrote this?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I was feeling something, and then this came out. Like, the only way I kind of know what I was feeling is what the music sounds like. I don't know what the feelings were or what the words behind it are. I know that this is a very emotionally, what's the word I want to use? I know Henry has a hard time looking back on this album because he said that it's came from a very emotionally significant time in his life, and it just feels like that. It feels like a very emotionally vulnerable and expressive album in ways that I don't know if Henry could put into words. So I don't know how we would be able to. It feels like missing the point for us to try to put it into words when the whole kind of feeling of the album is things that couldn't be expressed in words.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I really struggled with doing this podcast with this album because it's just so not possible in any way to describe how it actually is. I would say it's probably the most human album they've made because it's raw emotions. There's no thought behind anything, probably. It's just every single emotion drawn out through several layers of instruments, and this is what we got, and it resonates with everyone. I've never ever dealt with any sort of depression, and life now is super amazing, but it doesn't change anything in regards to how I would perceive this album when I'm actually listening to it. Because you would think, okay, I really like this album when I was through a rough time. Okay, so when you're suddenly doing well, when you go back to it, I suddenly feel like some sort of empty husk, like this album has no meaning to me anymore. No, it doesn't. Everything is still there, even though it's not portraying anything depressive like to me. It's just, I mean, it's the same as fucking Pink Floyd again. It is really bringing up an unknown sort of emotion that cannot be boxed into sad or happy or angry or frustrated or anything. It is just raw emotion all the way around. And I'm really surprised to see that none of us has spoken about this album except for when we've done the other podcast and we've been like, oh, it's gonna be great when we're gonna do this one because it's all our favorites. But to hear that we all share basically exactly the same feelings, even though we've not talked about any of it before, that has to be some sort of otherworldly thing.
Yeah, you're totally right.
This cannot just be down to fucking neurons doing shit. It has to be something else.
It's actually a bit interesting for me now to kind of hear your guys' feelings regarding the album, because like, I mean, I've dealt with depression basically all my life, and kind of the emotions that are packed into the album, I feel more the same but towards Verisäkeet instead of this album. Like, I mean, sure, like this, it is like full of emotions, but like for me, kind of the personal like connection lies in Verisäkeet album rather than this album. So this is in a way a little bit forgotten album to me in that sense. But yeah, it's just, I guess it's also a bit like when like Verisäkeet came out, what I was going through back then already and stuff like that. So it's easier to kind of maybe then connect the dots there, but just interesting to hear others' kind of feelings regarding it.
I think Verisäkeet has a lot of those qualities already there, obviously. Like I feel that way about, Pimea and Jotunheim and stuff like that. I think one of the things about this album, I think, is that it doesn't let you casually listen to it, So I think maybe where my relationship with Verisäkeet is a little bit different is that I've kind of taken it for granted more often. I've kind of thrown it on in the background, or I've sort of just like half listened to it. I think one of the things with this album that you're making me realize is I think that the fact that it demands so much of your attention also makes it so that you more consistently, I more consistently have this sort of emotional reaction to it because I'm investing so much focus.
If I can add something more about that.
Yeah.
For me, this album, I have been in states of depression also, but that's not the point there. For me, it's a catalyst of emotions. Like the best way for me personally to listen to the album is where I'm at the peak of my happiness, because I think we can all agree that we have very strong emotions coming out when listening to this album, and I really enjoy when I'm happy to listen to it. It's such, as you say, Sasan, I'm 100% agreeing with you. It's like you can't just switch to another stuff for 1 second. It's so demanding. Yeah, that's we have the depression point of view, because it's not a funny album in my opinion, but it's also a very beautiful piece of music, uh, written by composed, sorry, by people who know music. And I wrote that quote on my notepad this morning. For me, this album is the perfect blend of all their influences and motivations in music in general. That was my last take in general.
Well, since we've been talking already about the emotions and the depression and stuff, I guess the only thing that I really want to add is that was it Francesco who first? Yeah, you mentioned the feeling of like the dark cloud, and that definitely resonates with me also. And yeah, I mean, to me, it makes sense that it's somewhere between depressed or happy or just raw emotion that isn't really about one specific thing. Um, a few, I studied philosophy in college, and there's a few philosophers like Nietzsche who kind of talk about this, um, you know, the idea that basically most people live their lives in denial about like bad things in the world, that we have these coping mechanisms that don't let us think about it, or think about the fact that we're going to die, right? We just ignore it and pretend that that's not going to happen. And Nietzsche, for example, his whole thing was like, okay, well, is there a way that I can look at the terrible things that are going to happen and accept them and still find some sort of value in it? And I think a lot of times art will try to talk about those things, talk about depressing topics or negative things, and will always try to find some sort of positive side to it, or some sort of like, but actually it's not that bad, or silver lining, right? You guys know the where the term silver lining comes from? Like what is that? Like the idea is you're looking at a dark cloud, but because the sun is behind it, the edges of it are lit up, so it has like a silver lining. But this album doesn't feel like silver lining. It feels like the dark cloud. And one of the things that Nietzsche talks about is being able to find the beauty in the terrible things. Like if we are eventually going to die, and at some point we'll get sick, and more bad things will randomly happen to us than good things will randomly happen to us, right? Like if we can still see the beauty in the way things are, even like the bad things, like that's a very powerful emotional thing. And this album, and sort of like the emotion of it, and something that I think has left such a big impression on me personally, is that it's a very beautiful album, but it's not trying to find a positive, or it's not like it's not so bad. It just kind of feels like all of the negative things, but it's such a beautiful way of looking at them. And I think that's a very I think for me that's what the emotion of the album is, and certainly the way it ends, which I guess we'll talk about more specifically, but I think like it fully captures that feeling.
And I can add to that, as a French people, we have this, as I was mentioning earlier, this depressive, suicidal black metal scene. which is bad in my opinion, and doesn't encapture which is musically like very bad to listen, and this album is doing that for sure. So don't listen to French black metal, listen to Moonsorrow.
You mean Le Légion Noire or
Oof.
something else?
Do you want us to do a podcast about Les Légions?
But I mean, is that what you mean, or are you talking about something different?
No, there is part of that which is from Les Légions Noires, Black Legion, in English.
I guess also Nocturnal Depression and stuff.
Yeah,
like that, right?
yeah. And those bands are not bad, but that's a very, very personal point of view. But
I think a lot of maybe what you're speaking to is a lot of bands approach it in a very cheap way, right?
Yeah,
you got power chords, and you're like, there's no point in life. It's like it's kind of
I mean, if black metal was cinema, Moonsorrow on this album will be like, I don't know, Kubrick or way ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
Hope you like that, black metal fans. I'll send you my LinkedIn.
Okay, shall we get into details?
Sure.
Like chronologically, if that is possible, like instead of going song by song, but
nature sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
Section 1, nature
chronologically.
Yeah.
Well, the first one is actually easy. It's the intro. So the first track is called Jasta syntynyt Varjojen virta, but it's actually two, yeah? So it's one track, and Jasta syntynyt, Born of Ice, is the first 4 or 5 minutes. And actually, if you listen to it, it's easy to hear where it ends and the actual song starts. So we have this intro with these noises, nature noises, like wind, some crackling fire perhaps, or something like this.
Sorry, Abel, I have to correct you. That's called sound design. That's very important.
What did I call it?
No, noises, but that was for the
sorry.
Ton 10 tin. Editing in.
Yeah, well, the conversation went somewhere, but I still want to point out that Jasta syntynyt is the intro. It ends at around 5 minutes, and actually the distinction between Jasta syntynyt and Varjojen virta is pretty easy to notice if you listen for it. Let's play it, and I'm sure you will hear it. That was it. That was the end of the intro, and now starts the actual song, Varjojen virta.
Well, one thing I want to point out is listening to the album for the first time. When it comes to the very beginning, I hadn't really listened to the first sound you hear. So there's some like, ice cracking and stuff like that, but there is a very low note underneath the whole thing, and I have no idea what that is, like what they used to make that. And I think that off the bat, this album production-wise starts with these like little subtle elements that not only do I normally not notice, but I have no idea what that is. I can't just say like, oh, that's wind noise, and then they have a flute doing this. Like, I have no idea what that low note is coming from.
Man, I tell you something. On my notes, a lot of them are, what is this instrument? What is making this sound?
Yeah, no clue.
You are on the very intro of the first song, like those cracking. Maybe I think it's not ice, because ice cracking does not sound like that. It could be some sound processed through many plugins and stuff like that. I wanted to ask Henry, but Henry didn't want to really talk about it. But that could be also lava. Lava can do that sound of that's kind of sounds. For the deep rumble notes, you have a lot of stuff like really matter related, like also lava rocks, movements of physical huge stuff that can made
like getting dragged.
Yeah, that rumble with this note, it's not like that stupid to think about it. So I don't have the perfect answer, but I really think that those cracking we hear all around the album are either made of processed ice or lava from volcanoes, and rumble from physical huge natural things. And
you don't think it's like a synth with like a low note pressed?
I can't be.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just clarifying. You think it's a natural thing?
I'm not sure, but the rumble, I'm not sure. That could be a natural thing, but the crackings are in my ear 100% natural recordings.
The crackling to me sounds like if you took a rock and you have asphalt and you kind of slowly scrape the rock against asphalt. That's what it sounds to me.
That could be something.
That would work. That would work completely.
Well, if in the movie Psycho they made the blood by pouring chocolate on the woman, I guess the equivalent in sound is making a volcano eruption with a stone against asphalt.
Oh, you know, that's my job. I'm like taking cats and turning them into dragons. So you can do anything with anything. My former teacher was making dinosaurs with saloon doors. It's
with what? Sorry.
Saloon doors, you know, like. And with a little bit of processing and plugins, it was like Jurassic Park. Take your tickets. You owe me $50. It's but this really sound design intro that we can find alongside the album as well is really interesting, because I was noticing again the titles of the song this morning, and I may be mistaken, but you have these, in my mind, connections to Norse mythology, like the world is born from the corpse of the first giant, and you have this very real material to begin with, and those sounds are like something is changing and evolving, and it's still something really you can touch it, you can feeling, rocks are moving, something is happening. And if you can correct me, Alexi, but I think there is the name Apocalypse in the Finnish name. So stuff are moving towards whatever end you want. So I think that's really clever to have this bit of sound design at the beginning and elsewhere in the album.
The first instrument we hear is a clean electric guitar. Is that the first time in a Moonsorrow song we hear a clean electric guitar rather than an acoustic guitar? I would remember better, but it's been 13 months since we talked about Phrase Again. But I don't remember there being, I don't think they've really even done it again after. That's a very, like, quintessentially, like, Pink Floyd-y sounding. Yeah. Am I right in that? Have they done that before or after?
I'm going to check the song because I'm not even sure.
I think I mean, with this kind of production, with this kind of sound, it's certainly the first time. This guitar is sounding so clear and nice. When re-listening to the album, those couple of days, one thing came into my mind that it was like, I'm really into prog rock, and the whole album was like prog rock if everything was bad in the world. And it comes back sometimes after, but I think it's the first time they have that sound. Probably,
yeah.
I don't want to be really picky on like it's the first time they have clear electric guitar sound, but with that quality of sound, it's the first time, I think, and that's great.
Yeah.
What was the story with the apocalypse?
Sorry,
You mentioned something about the apocalypse.
I just said something with the apocalypse.
A little bit earlier, you were saying that something is finished.
I was saying that I think I don't know which word of the title of the album was Apocalypse in Finnish. I may be mistaken. It's
none of them.
None of them?
Yeah, it's Hävitetty. It's like chapter 5, Ravaged.
Okay, so I've been mistaken this whole time. Like I thought it was chapter 5, Apocalypse. So that's on me.
Well, at least that is the official translation, Ravaged.
Yeah.
Like means like desolate or something like this, no? Like something completely destroyed or something like this, no?
Yeah, kind of like if it was like apocalypse, that would be maailmanloppu, end of the world, essentially.
Mm.
Well, what is the Hävitetty? Like, what is the sort of context of how you would use that word in Finnish? Like, if you describe something as that, what is something that might have happened to it?
Well, Hävitetty to me kind of, well, if something is Hävitetty, you could think about it as something has been erased completely. For example, like if you would describe, say you have some documents and you have destroyed them, you could essentially say that they are Hävitetty, for example. But also, like, if you think about like as in structures or what when it goes to like nature, that definitely means like it's just now barren or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that about? Sorry, would you say that about a city that has been bombed to the ground, for example, in a war?
Yeah, you could.
So I think ravaged is a very good translation. I think that's pretty much exactly.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely works in this context, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the end of the world, even though we don't really know what happened, what brought the end, but it's the end of the world. And here, if we're already talking about this, Aleksi, if you can tell us something about the lyrics, even though we have the translations, but I don't know, I find them pretty so poetic and a bit hard to understand what the hell he's trying to say. Do you or any of the others, if you read the translations, have any comments on the lyrics or any interpretation?
So for now, I haven't actually really looked at the lyrics in a very long time. So, and now I haven't had time to do so even.
Hmm. Yeah, I only know the last lyric translated. I'm sure I've read the lyrics at some point. But yeah, I think I had a similar experience, Abel, where it was more mood than a specific like plot. But I think you and I have talked about this before, and I don't know if I'm right about this, but I'm under the impression that Varjojen is, at least in sort of like plot, is a sequel to Hävitetty, and it takes place after.
That is correct.
So in a way, and that album definitely has a plot, right? And it definitely has like a story that you can follow. And so it's interesting, like this one must have enough of a story that you could have a follow-up story after it. But I don't know what that story is exactly.
Death drifts on the stream of shadows, the soil is gray and my heart gone. Okay.
I don't get a super like, I think an album like Voimasta is a very explicitly like sword and shield era thing, right? I think this album could work as something set in the modern day. And I know that Varjojen especially, I think, feels like something that is contemporary and isn't like set in like a sort of Lord of the Ringsy or like Norse mythology-y kind of setting. And I think maybe that's where some of the extra kind of poetry comes in to sort of not be so literal, because to still sort of give it that abstract feeling without being like, and then a plane crashed. Like I think before they could say, and then the longboats went to this place, but I don't think that quite sounds the same if you're in a in a more timeless setting, I guess is what I'm trying to say, where it's not that it's set in a modern setting, it's that it could be anytime, it could be anywhere.
Yeah, the first song as I'm hearing, well, the intro is very simple. Through the death of the sun, a new world is born, a drop of water in cold to run on the hands of men. That's the intro. Then the song, from what you can see, the lyrics are more about like the mountains are crumbling and everything is turning dark, and it's a bit of a description which I guess could be understood as the end of the world. Actually, it's nice because it doesn't tell you if a meteor fell, if there was a nuclear war, or if what the hell is going on. It's just this feeling of the actual end of the world. You don't know the cause, but everything is crumbling and falling apart. All right, so we were in the intro, remember?
Yeah.
We start with the sound design.
Sorry.
We start with some design the sound until the bass comes in, and there is a lot of bass in this album. Sometimes, well, not through all of it, but there are points where it's very prominent and it's really low. It's very fat and heavy and low, and this kind that you feel more than you hear.
really do agree with you. The bass is amazing on this album, and in particular, there is a break after 15 minutes. I don't have the exact time, but the break every black thrash metal band would love to have that stuff as their intro. That's just great. The bass is amazing. I'm done.
I think it's a fretless bass, or in the intro for sure, I think, because the slides are very clearly done. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, it has to be, right?
Here's an interesting thing. Ville plays a 5-string bass, but the band plays an E standard. So normally you would have a bass that's just one octave lower than the guitars, but the way Ville has his bass set up compared to how the guitars in Moonsorrow are set up, the bass can go much lower than one octave and has a lot more like extra low space compared to where the other instruments are. So, for example, a 5-string bass might normally be played with 7-string guitars, or might be played with guitars that are tuned down very low. So I always knew that he did that, and I know that they use that to make the guitars sound like they're playing certain notes that you can't normally play on a guitar in that tuning. But the interesting thing that I just looked up is I was just now thinking maybe he wasn't always using a 5-string bass, and maybe the extra low sound of this album is something that started around then. So I looked up the Jumalten Kaupunki video, and in that video he's playing a 4-string bass. So it is possible that either on this album or on Vrisiket is when he started with the extra low bass. Or he just didn't have a 5-string bass in that video. I don't know. That's something, I don't know, hopefully one day we can ask. But that's something that I've always thought was very quintessentially Moonsorrow. The 5-string bass, but with the guitars in 6 strings and regular tuning. But I didn't realize it wasn't always like that. And it makes sense because that extra low feeling isn't always there. You really, really hear it on this album, but I don't think there's anything on like Sudan Uni that makes the bass sound like it's extra low compared to the rest of the stuff.
Remember a few years ago when they asked which songs that they've never played live before that they wanted us to hear live? And the one that won was Haska, but I'm quite sure that Varjojen Virta was the one that was the second one most requested. Hopefully someday.
Maybe in the most, but they just the survey was not legally binding, I guess.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, maybe actually Haska wasn't the number one.
No.
I actually think it was Varjojen Virta that was number one.
Yeah, well, we mentioned this. My theory on why Haska wasn't played live is because one of the strings is tuned down, and that's probably annoying to do on stage. I mean, eventually they figured it out. I don't know if they switched guitars or whatever. I don't know if that's the case with this song. I don't think. I mean, I haven't tried to play the song, so I haven't noticed if it's tuned down, but it doesn't sound like it. I think maybe they just haven't played it live because it's very long and it's not obvious which parts to. I mean, there's a million problems with playing it live. Let's be honest. Like, there's an acoustic section that's really hard to do live, and you can't take it out. There's lots of slow builds, and it's not the most energetic.
But if they can turn Kaiko into a an actual live song, then I'm sure that they could manage to do something here that would work quite well.
Yeah, I mean, for the acoustic part, if they wanted to, they probably would play clean electric guitar and with some keyboards. I mean, they would make a different arrangement, but they would make it work for sure if they wanted to.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't rearrange it like they did with Kaiku, but they would make it work.
Actually, nice. lots of other songs that they play live very often. Sankaritari na orki me encanta ya. Que me encanta ya the song. Actually, there are lots of keyboard melodies that are taken to the guitar, and or the other way around. I don't remember exactly. I think we spoke about it, but for sure there are lots of rearrangements in live situations and in the studio recordings. So I think they are not afraid of that. They do it all the time.
Since we're still talking about the beginning of the song and we've been talking about production, when I was taking notes, there's something that I noticed. I was walking around before a class I had to teach, and it was raining and very windy as I was listening to the song, and it like really fit. And it's the first time that I noticed the drums have a very not natural, is like natural, like they sound very much like nature, like the way the toms sound, they're very deep and rumbly, and they sound a lot like thunder in the distance, you know, when the song really gets started, and you hear the dum, 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 you know, that part sounds almost kind of like building thunder in the distance, and that's something that I really paid attention to this time, listening to the album. When the song proper kicks in, the kicks almost sound like hard rain, you know, and I don't know, I noticed that aspect this time, and I don't know if that's something that was intentional or not, but it definitely like has that aesthetic for me.
At least if that's not intentional, that's something we can all agree on, probably, because I was writing stuff about the drums this morning. The drums sounds amazing. I've been trying to make drums sounds good for my productions for work and stuff like that for years. That's really difficult to have a good sounding drum. And for example, here behind me, we had a lot of African bands going here to record stuff or rock music and stuff. And the sound, really the sound of the drums on this particular album are amazing. That they sound powerful, wide, and true. And those three things are amazing, and I really think they serve all the purpose of the music very, very well on this album. I don't want to know how they did it because it will break the magic. For me, it's a magic trick. It's amazing. And I was it's written down there, but again, Marco is way above everybody. He's being an absolute genius with these drums. The drum sounds amazing on this album.
Well, the reason they chose Tico Tico as the studio word to record this was the drums. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if he spoke about it or if Henry spoke about it. I mean, Henry for sure at some point, but I don't know if it was with us or some other interview. But anyway, I remember him saying that they for Sudanuni, of course. They were like 20 years old, and they had a contract to make an album. They had to choose a studio. They went to their favorite albums. Okay, where was this recorded? Where were the drums recorded? Tico Tico. Okay, so we're going to Tico Tico because of the drum sound. So yeah, this was their 5th production in Tico Tico. And they had also, I guess, learned a bit more about production and everything. So it's clearly audible.
Yeah, well, this is, Verita is obviously an amazing album with amazing composition on it. That's something that we talked about a lot. But this feels, this feels like it was written really by a composer who can compose anything, right? Like that has the skill to do anything they want to do. You don't, and you don't necessarily hear that on, definitely not the first 2 albums, right? That sounds like people who are learning and kind of like pushing their limits in terms of what sort of quality of music they can make. But here, I think like Tomas was saying, it just sounds like they've completely sort of exceeded what at least I am able to like understand about what they did. And so the production goes well beyond, I think, just like, oh, this is like a good place to record drums, or they have good, I mean, there's like choices they made about how the toms sound different from how the snare or the kick sounds. Like they're just recorded in fundamentally different ways or put through some sort of totally different effect. They don't sound like they're in the same room, but they work really well together. It's really subtle and really well done. Another thing, just compositionally, is we can talk about the sort of the arcs of the songs and the journeys that the pieces go on, but there's a lot, in any given moment, there's a lot going on that you wouldn't hear on an earlier Moonsorrow album. So there's a lot of like synth stuff, but usually it's very quiet and very subtle and in the background. And the guitars are a lot more active and doing a lot more interesting things than just playing power chords, right? I mean, when you think back to the Voimassa album, you would have melodies like da 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 da, and you'd have like 2 guitars, a bass, and a keyboard that are all playing the same melody. And what I noticed on this album is it's really rare that the guitar you hear on the left and the guitar you hear on the right are playing the same thing. They have complementary stuff going on, but they're almost always playing different parts. And there's, I think, a really good, I wrote down an example, but I wrote it down in just me trying to spell out what the song sounded like, rather than saying what like timestamp it is.
Go for it.
It says wanna ooh, wanna ooh, wanna ooh, wanna. And so I'm trying to remember the part of the song.
What the fuck?
All right. Let me think. It's near the beginning, and it's
At least
If you want to find it on YouTube, go ahead. I mean, only you can
give
hear
me a
it anyway.
second. I'll find it.
I think compared to, for example, let's say Haska, you can listen to a song so many times you want, but at some point it's going to click, and then you really listen to it. And I still remember the exact same moment that happened for me with Haska and Gahun Kunsti and everything else, right? But after those, you listen to the song and you recall everything. But with this album, it's completely different. There's always these tiny bits of pieces that are so hidden that it's simply impossible to focus on everything every single time. And every single time there's a new thing that you focus on, like Sasan has already told earlier. But it is probably the first album where I've noticed that there's this amount of depth to this songwriting, that there's always something like the either it's the extremely amplified bass that is just, yeah, it almost takes over the lead. It almost becomes a lead bass in a sense, and it's the same with many parts of the songs, that then suddenly it's the drums that take over for a few seconds or a minute, and then it's this part of the right or left guitar. It's really all the way through this album. This is actually happening in some sense, and of course there's moments that are more so than the others, but it's compared to all other albums, this is a really standing out by far. And if not for me, I would say it's the first one from Moonsorrow where this is present, where it's not just like Haska. Once you've heard it, you've heard it all. There's never gonna get another amount of layer that you didn't notice before.
Yeah. So the section that I'm talking about is at 12 minutes and 48 seconds, and it's the melody that goes ba ba da 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 da. And there's a similar moment at the start of Auriko Yaku, where it's
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of do like a similar like type of like, it's a very Moonsorrow like guitar power chord slidey thing.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's on in Auriko Yaku, it's, you know, guitars, bass, everything is doing the same melody. Here, like, they sound very similar, but if you listen really carefully, the left guitar isn't playing the exact same thing during that part, and it has some different high parts, and then later on when the melody changes, they completely separate out, and it's this it's these two guitars that sort of like approach each other and separate away from each other and sort of do this dance that is really sophisticated and really well done in terms of how it's written, in a way that isn't super common in, you know, especially black metal. So that is one specific part that I wrote down that I think is a great example of how there's these little subtle approaches to the songwriting that make it so big. Because I think in terms of the total number of instruments, it's not that much different than Verisikets or Kiven Kataya. I just think that each element is doing different things, and so the finished product feels so much more complex and so much bigger without being confusing.
But it doesn't sound like a record made by a one-man band where he suddenly has like 30 layers of a guitar at the same time, and you're like, you don't have 30 guitarists playing this, so why would you even make this? This has an obvious band setting, and it's no way near what some other musicians might have done it, and where they overlay stuff too much, like 4 kinds of synths at the same time. You're like, what the fuck?
It feels like it follows a set of rules, right? Like, okay, these are the tools that I have to work with. I have like 2 guitars. There's some parts that kind of push that a little bit, but they're always in really like subtle ways, and ways that you could still play it live. Like, it sounds believable for a live sound, or at least one consistent group of musicians.
It could just be a tiny note, like extra, like 2 guitar notes at the same time, just to get the or 2 vocals at the same time. Like,
right.
I think this is probably the album of all I would have wanted the most to be a fly on the wall to see how is this even made, because all I can imagine is just Henry pouring out his soul, and that's it. I mean,
yeah.
I really think this is one of the albums where he has an unspeakable feeling that he just has to get it out, and once it's out, it's out, and you cannot touch anything. Like, there's this kind of recent documentary about Norwegian black metal, and they were talking with Putin, the guy that recorded all the famous black metal albums in the Grieghallen, and they were talking about how the recording sessions with Varg Vikernes and Burzum went, and that was very specific. Like, once the sound was reached, it's like, that's it, don't touch anything at all. It's exactly how it's supposed to sound now. That was very well planned out, or at least not necessarily planned out, but once it was there, he knew, this is how I want it to be. This is exactly how I envisioned it. And you're not supposed to touch anything here. But in this sense, I think it's in another way, it's probably more like, this is what came out of me. This is what feels right. It's not the same, there it is, don't touch anything. It's more like, this is what I created. I don't see how this could sound any different than this, so please keep it like this. But I would really love to know how the other guys in the band were involved in creating this album, actually.
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back to sort of what I was talking about earlier, when you have this thing that you're just trying to express and you're not sure what it is, but you like recognize it when you hear it. So that makes, I imagine something really similar, where it's like, okay, that is the thing. That is the thing that I was trying to get out. So you almost feel like you didn't choose how it was going to come out, so you shouldn't be able to choose how to change it. But it is a really interesting question of it feels like such a personal thing, but there's other people involved in it. And we didn't specifically, I mean, we didn't talk about these albums at all, but I don't know what the contribution of someone like Marco was in this process. And not, so there's the songwriting part and how much of it was a collaboration, but also just the, like, how the music is played and performed, like how the drums are played, or the bass parts, and how much of it was Henry saying, like, it needs to sound like this, how much was it people having the same vision, how much of it was different visions collaborating with each other. I would be really curious to know more about that.
Yeah, because we clearly all know that this has, in a big part, has to do with Henry and where he was at that time of his life, and that really made how the album is. But I'm not sure that any of the other members were in a similar situation. So if they were all like, you know, I can't resonate anything of what you're portraying because I'm feeling fine. How do you tell him, you're the only one that's really bad right now? I mean, you might be pouring your heart out and your soul out, and it sounds great and all, but we're not feeling it because we're in another stage of life. We're all happy, or that's why I really wanted to be a fly on the wall for creating this album, because it's not just Tuli Myrski, where there's a clearly, like, we have to make this epic song and some other stuff. We go to the recording session and we make whatever we do as friends, like we usually do. I think this is, I don't know, maybe some sort of dictatorship. Who knows?
it feels more motivated and more serious rather than just And another thing that Henry did mention when we were talking to him was I asked him about this period from like 2003 when Vizoram Slutet came out, and from there until Hävitetty, he released so much music, and so much of it was incredible. Like Not Fought, Vizoram Slutet, Kiven Kantaya, Veriziket, and this was sort of the like ultimate culmination of that, right? And after this, he said he experienced pretty bad burnout, I think it was, and his productivity since then has been, every so often. Tulomirsky was when? 2008,
right?
8.
So that was just a year later?
Yeah, it was super quick. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
But then again, it was only one song.
I guess, but after that, the Fintroll albums take a few years to come out. The Moonsorrow albums take, forever.
I mean, I think it's all that, the gradual expansion of work from Roivio and Angry Birds, right? And life with
of course,
three kids or 4 kids or how many kids.
But this album feels like this, like creative energy is building and building and building and productive, and this feels like what exhausts it and gets everything out of his system in a way.
Tan Ten Tin, editing in.
I would like to expand a bit on this because I think Sasan brought up a very interesting topic. So I went and I checked all the recording periods and release dates of all the Fintroll and Moonsorrow albums. So if we start, actually let's start from the beginning. Midnattens Vidunder was recorded in September 1999. Sudenuni was recorded in February 2000. In December 2000 and January 2001, Fintroll's Jaktenstid was recorded. Then in August 2001, Voimasta Jakuniasta was recorded. Then in 2002, November and December, Kiven Kantaya was recorded, meaning that between the recording of Voimasta in August 2001 and the recording of Kiven Kantaya in November-December 2002, it was about a year and a half that we guess that is when he wrote the album, yeah? Then Vizoram Slutet by Fintroll was recorded in early 2003, February. I believe that was a shorter writing period because it had to do with the death of the previous Fintroll guy and everything, so that was a bit different. But then back to normal. Not Food by Fintroll was recorded in autumn 2003. Then Verisaket was recorded in September 2004, meaning that there was a bit less than a year between the recording of Not Food and the recording of Verisaket. Then the next was Hävitetty, which was recorded between May and August 2006. And then this is, I think, where Sasan made a mistake. There is, sorry about the pronunciation, Jordens Djup, which was recorded in October 2006. And then Tulomirsky was recorded in January-February 2008. Then again, a bit over a year, 2009 summer, Fintroll Niflheim was recorded. Amazing album, by the way. Then Varjojen, Moonsorrow's Varjojen, was recorded in September 2010. And until here, we are basically 1 year between recordings. So basically in 2001, he recorded Jaktenstid and Voimasta. 2002, he recorded Kiven Kantaya. 2003, he recorded Vizoram Slutet and Natfood. 2004, he recorded Verisaket. 2006, he recorded Hävitetty. This is almost 2 years, by the way, yeah? Almost 2 years, which means that Sasan is actually mistaken. Because there is indeed many albums but then the culmination of that would be 2004, and then it's almost 2 years until Hävitetty is recorded. Then after that, Urdjordens Djup, also in 2006, and then a bit over a year later is Tuli Myrsky, a bit over a year later is Niflheim, a bit over a year later is Varjojen, and then it's already 2 years until Blueswept, 3 years until Jumal den Aika, 5 years until Vredeswept. So in other words, the tightest composing periods were between February 2000 and September 2004, and between whenever he started Hävitetty, which was recorded in mid-2006, and September 2010. So if anything, Hävitetty was the beginning of another period and not the culmination of a very productive period. Oh, and by the way, Henry was working in Digital Chocolate, which is a video game company writing music, between 2004 and 2013. And he started in Rovio, the company that makes Angry Birds, where he works currently, also in 2013. He wrote about it on his blog. I mean, this is not super insider information or anything. He spoke about it publicly. And again, it doesn't really correspond with any more creative periods or periods where he wrote more music for his bands.
10 editing done.
And I wonder what the environment around that was like. Like, did it feel like that? Did they feel like they were working on their masterpiece? Or did they feel like they were just making an album? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. It could easily be that this is, of course, something that he really wants to portray, but it could also be something like, fuck, have been so busy for the past 5 years, I'm burning out, and these are my frustrations, not necessarily. Hey, that could, if it's family life that was the issue back then, could have also been work related, that work was filling too much or hobby was filling too much, and you know.
Or I mean, sometimes it's nothing, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know,
and sometimes
like
it
I've
could be
dealt with
absolutely nothing.
depression. Like you just sometimes I don't know what his situation was or wasn't, but for me, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like something that I can point to in my life and say.
Yeah, I mean, it could easily be that there was nothing else, and that's why it filled so much. I mean, if you're occupied, you might not think about anything else, and then in a sense, that's good.
Can we talk about the section of the song that goes acoustic and then has that really long build-up, which is an incredible. What I wanted to say about it, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, but listening to it this time, what stood out to me is, okay, the idea is that you're bringing the sort of energy, like, and the amount of sound really low, really small, so that you can build and keep building and keep building on top of it. That's kind of like how Stairway to Heaven works, right? It's just like this thing, and it keeps building and building and building. And I think this is really, is better than Stairway to Heaven. But the thing that I was really impressed by is, I think most bands, if I was to try to write something like that, and it was like, okay, now make it really like sparse and very small, and we'll build up from here, you would have like one acoustic guitar. And that's something that they've kind of like done before. I think that's something you might like expect to hear more on like Verisa Ket, where there's like that moment in Pimea that Henry doesn't like. But here, even when that section starts, you have so many layers of things going on. It's around like 15 minutes and 40 seconds or something. But you have like
16:30, yeah.
an acoustic guitar on the left. You have an acoustic guitar on the right that are playing the same thing. You have a electric guitar with a clean sound in the center on top of those, and then you have like two different synth sounds and then like an organ, and that's where you start, and then there's bass, and then there's drums, and then things build up, and it's kind of crazy. It just goes to show the skill in songwriting and the production, that even when the album is at its kind of smallest sound, there's still so much stuff there, and they're still able to build up to this huge moment. But
I don't want
Francesco,
to
yeah,
I don't want to
please.
disappoint you, Sasan, but you said the magic word, layers. I think they are, for this song, they show us the way they are mastering layers. This is an amazing one. Like I'm using layers all the time at my work for video games sound design, also for music. And for sound design stuff, you have to build layers for a very short amount of time. And here you have this really slow and nice buildup of layers. And everybody would think like once we have all the layers, it will be a bit chaotic and some stuff like that. It's just really nice and harmonic and well composed / mixed, two different stuff, but you have the same result at the end. But the if I can approach the sound of this album in a video games way of thinking, the layering is amazing. You hear everything sounds perfect, and every layer have its own importance, if I can say so. And the beginning of the song, we can stretch it for like minutes, but it's an amazing build-up, and it sounds really, really nice. The way the guitars are collectively answering each other, the way the voices enter also very slow, building to something more black metal. The bass, we talked briefly about it, but very round and generous and precise. Marco's drums, we love Marco's drums here. I think keyboards also, everything is so I think this intro is the work of an artisan. Like the guys know now how to make a song, how to make it sound nice and true and vibrant and emotional, and we have the perfect display of their craftsmanship right now. And because they are layering all of their talent, and that sounds just amazing.
Maybe this is the contrast to giving Kantaya that the purpose was to make the best fucking folk metal album ever. Quite forced. This is not forced in any way. I mean, they managed to make probably the best folk metal album ever, but that's only because of their godliness. But this doesn't sound forced in any way. But I think if I have to pinpoint one thing that I might not like particularly in the constructions of the sounds or whatever, maybe it's only on this remastered album, the vinyl box set. There's some sort of interference in the background in the bass, like reverb or the frequencies that the bass brings out. It's very, it almost kind of overshadows everything else, and not in a good way. But it's very rare that I listen to the album from the actual vinyl box set. But I've just noticed that sometimes, maybe also on the album, but on like on Spotify or whatever. But then it really has to be quite loud. But I think my first time when I noticed it was on this vinyl box that there was some sort of interference with the bass line that, like, there's some other albums where there can be some sort of background noise that kind of ruins the mood a little bit, and maybe there's also tiny little bit of this in this album. But the last few times I've heard it, I have not heard that particular thing in a long time. So maybe it is only on the box set, but it's highly frustrating when you notice it.
How do you clean your records before playing them?
With both a spray and a brush.
You guys clean
No.
your records?
We do.
I thought you got them because if I wanted it to sound clean, I'd just listen to it on Spotify.
Yeah, that was the thing that Henry told me when I visited him last time. Like, he was so annoyed with all this vinyl re-emergencing, because since the 90s, where everything was digital, it only made things worse when it was made analog and put on this fucking vinyl.
But I think I can agree with you, and the listeners will get me in the comments if I'm wrong. Comments the video, like and subscribe. Fun. I'm a child of YouTube. But even when I'm listening on it on CD, in my car or on YouTube, this album has this particularity of being really I'm trying to translate French to English, but energetic in the bass part of the spectrum. There is there is a lot of energy going on in the bass bass frequencies. You can hear it on YouTube. I really enjoy that. But if the vinyl press is not done correctly, or your system or something, you kind of, for that word bavé, I don't have the like
a muddy low end.
It's more like spitting, like something
buzzing.
Kind of that.
It's a kind of a buzzing kind of sound.
And is it your record player with a bad electric stuff, or is it just the mix that
I definitely have some electrical interference with my pickup, and I haven't managed to fix that yet, but that shouldn't have been the issue back then. That it seemed like an issue that became more and more, especially after I got the Vindier box set.
Yeah.
That's when I really noticed it. Like, it was basically just saying all the time in the background. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Maybe it's this power. What did he call it? The horn of power or something? In the background. But I think Francesco was going to say something.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 hour ago. Yeah, maybe about the bass lines Mikkel mentioned, I think, because maybe it was just intentionally. I mean, in prog music also, if you think, for example, at Jethro Tull, there are many fans who dislike how they put the bass on the Aqualung album, because it makes a contrast with the other, so the guitar part and so on. And maybe this is the case. I mean, it's just a choice to make a dissonance in some parts. But I'm not sure which parts you mean. So I need to re-listen all the album again.
Yeah, I haven't been home for quite some time, as you might know, because of the work. So I haven't had time to put anything on the vinyl player. But it could also be some kind of compression error, maybe, that compared to the masters, which are probably digital, when they were made to vinyl, that some sort of frequency went out of line, and that's why it's heightened in some sense, because it's not like it's the other way around, that the way it was recorded was analog, and then when it was digital, the digital picked up some noise that you couldn't hear on the analog recording. So
Right.
it must be some kind of compression thing, maybe, on the other side, if not electrical interference.
Yeah,
I will
no,
send you a rip of the vinyl because it's online. I will send it to you and you will compare and you will decide if it's your thing or if it's a vinyl thing. The master.
Sounds like a plan.
Francesco, what are your thoughts on that section that has all of the acoustic instruments, the folk instruments, the accordion coming in?
Is the accordion, which plays alongside another instrument, I think, when it plays da 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 da, that part.
Yeah, what is that? You know,
I don't remember the timing actually.
maybe
I
a
tell you,
violin.
1710. 1710 is accordion. If you want to check.
But I'm not completely sure, but I think there is another instrument which plays the same melody with a lower volume.
It could be a violin. I don't have the liner notes in front of me. Does Hävitetty play on this album?
I don't know.
Because if not, this would be... Because he plays on virta.
He's not mentioned here.
By the way, that melody is just amazing.
Yeah, beautiful.
And right after that comes the actual guest of the album. So when you're finished talking about accordions, we will talk about him.
But I have to say really quickly, just a brief parenthèse, a bit of French sells everything. But the melodies of the album for first song and second songs, either, they are so well written. You know, you have this feeling, okay, I'm listening to Moonsorrow. You have this epic feeling going on, but the black cloud is here, and you can go past a certain amount of greatness, and you are like obliged to get down a little bit. And I think that everything rhythm related is amazing for this album.
Yeah.
But melody related, you have this really, really nice subtlety to the fact that you can't go to the access to the past album or aesthetics of being into folky Finnish black metal stuff. You have to get down a little bit. You have to come back down to earth. And I was talking with a friend before the recording of this episode at the bar, and we were talking about struggle. For me, you have this really good feeling of struggle. This album is struggling to get to a point to be Blind Guardian, for example, and instead it just being a more dark depression, more dark version of an epic album, and that's where it shines. especially on those melodic stuff, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I love that. It's so
Yeah.
well done on that album.
A really good friend of mine went to college for composition at a pretty prestigious school in the US, and he had another friend there that he made, and he's a massive metalhead. He was getting this other guy into metal, and he showed him a few things and asked for some of my recommendations. I was like, Moonsorrow, but don't start with Hävitetty. Like, Hävitetty is the best one. Don't start there. Start with like because they were asking about like black metal, like heavier stuff. So I was like, start with virta. So they listened to virta and they liked it, and then I was like, okay, check out Hävitetty. It's like, it's a bigger ask, it's a little heavier, whatever, the things that I normally say to people. But one, because they were composers at a composition school, like a 30-minute song it's not, that's not a problem for them. But to him, and who knows how carefully he was listening or whether he got the mood or the vibe or whatever, to him, he was like, that one sounded way less. He said to him it sounded almost like power metal. Like, he thought like it was very melodic and over the top. And I was like, were we listening to the same album? Yeah, but what you're saying, like, I hadn't heard anyone else say that, but you were saying, Tomas, that it kind of like, it has such like big melodies and big moments that it could kind of enter that territory. For this guy, it did, I guess, but I never even noticed that until.
I think it's funny because I would portray people thinking that, really. For me, after all those discussions we've had and talking about Moonsorrow melodies and style and stuff like that, I think the melodies, at least in the first song, they are like shut down. They try to reach something. Again, Francesco Black Cloud. They try to reach something, but they can't, and they are dragged down afterwards to the where they went. And I think, first of all, that's really interesting and clever in terms of composition. That worked really well. It's very nice to hear that. And so throughout the album, and I'm really into the first song. Throughout the first song, at least, you have this feeling of you are in deep shit and you're trying to get up, but you are not, but you're trying. And I try to have a very deep American voice, but
trying.
And I find that aesthetic very, very nice, because you have this really nice progression points, musically speaking, and you have this little down, which is both side. You have this emotionally stuff like, okay, we are going down, so it's not great, and musically speaking, that's great. That sounds very, very nice. So we were talking about depression and stuff like that. This album is also very, very well composed to be enjoyable in a way.
So one of the ways I think compositionally that they accomplish the feeling that you're talking about, listening to it, especially on this first song, it feels like they had a couple, my composer friends will call it a motif. Yeah, so some melodies that come up a lot in different ways. And the first time you hear those melodies in the song, usually they're like a very like intense and powerful version of that melody. So like the three ones off the top of my head are the one that I was humming earlier, the the first time, I think it's the first time you hear it, it's like this big melody with the guitars are doing it. But then later it's a little more subdued and they're singing over it and it's less intense. And then there's parts where it's like palm muted, where it's dum. And so it's like this melody, but it's like kind of getting more subtle and it's underneath more things, and maybe that conveys that sense of struggle or like lowering feeling. Another one is the first time you hear that, it's really prominent, and then you hear it, the bass does it at one point where it cuts to just bass. And there's a part where the guitars are kind of doing the squealing thing, where it's like go wow now. Wow now. Underneath that, the left guitar is doing so it's like it like you hear these things and you become familiar with them, and they start floating around later. The one that is kind of backwards in terms of how they do it is the first guitar melody. I always think of Shine On You Crazy Diamond because it's like 4 notes, you know? Yeah, exactly. And Shine On You Crazy Diamond is dun 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 dun. And here it's dun 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 dun.
This is actually not what Sasan was humming. What Sasan was humming comes actually 4 minutes later, but it's very similar. It's also 4 notes, I think the same length, just a bit different. Listen carefully.
Dun 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 dun. Dun, dun. And you kind of like hear that subtly a few times, but then the end is where you kind of hear it most prominently. So you have these melodies that start big and they kind of like dwindle, and you have one melody that you kind of hear a little bit, and then it gets bigger and bigger until it's the final. It's really, really well.
I mean,
done.
it's my really, and I have to stop speaking about that afterwards. But for me, if I have one word to describe the album and the first song in particular, it will be subtlety. Like, yes, you have a vast array of feelings, and you have these dynamics, which is huge for black metal. Like, you have very sorry, I'm trying to translate what I'm thinking, but you have these very low levels of sound with high levels of sound, so you have huge dynamics.
Dynamics. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, if I can say a joke, I think we can be on a French public radio, but that's you have these dynamics, but you have subtlety in everywhere, in the sound, in the composition, in the instruments chosen, and that's a very mature approach of music, because you are mixing like your influences, your feelings, and what you want to do, and that's just great. I don't know when I can or could squeeze that one, but 15 minutes 30 seconds, around that. There is a Mitya's solo from Mitya.
Guitar
Oh yes.
I'm deeply sorry to put that on the table, but on this album, Mitya's solo are just like pure hard rock sound put into black metal. I love them. That's great.
I think it's a great solo. I think it fits perfectly.
Oh no, that fits perfectly. But they are just like, in terms of mixing, just a little bit downer, not to take the whole place, but they're just these solos. I just want to hear Saxon or Scorpion afterwards. I love the solos on the album. I think they work very, very well, either in terms of sound and in terms of mood. Like, you just spent like 10 minutes hearing good drums, acoustic guitars, and good melodies, and you have this like routine going on, and you have just this very, very, very fast and tiny solo reminding you we can have some fun and epic stuff going on. And they happen I think 2 times on this song, probably another time on the second one. I don't want to be mistaken, sorry, but all the solo from Mitya on the record are just parfait.
Abel, you were saying there's a guest on this song? How did I not know that?
Yes.
Moment, guy,
because
right?
wait, because since you were talking about the parts that repeat, I wanted to mention that. So once Henry was talking about this, and as he did in the interview, and he has done other times, what for everybody is magical, he says, that is just this thing and another thing, and that's it. And he was saying, I think it was about Tuli specifically, but anyway, about the long songs in general, that every couple of minutes or something, there is a part where you could finish the song. And you just choose to write a bit more because you can, and write more. And there is a number of times that we hear this tan, 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 tan. And specifically at 10:50, which is close to the beginning, I mean, first third, I realize that it sounds almost identical as in the end. Actually, the song could really finish there because it's pretty intense already. Of course, the last repetition is missing. The last repetition is missing, which then allows to continue with something else and to segue in a proper way. But yeah, there is a number of times that this chan 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 sounds, and yeah, I could believe that the song couldn't hear. But then I think only once at the very end there are these bells, or I don't know, it's something that sounds like bells to me. That is beautiful, right. Wonderful.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and good call. I forgot that melody does play right in that first section in a very prominent way.
Yeah. And Thomas was speaking about power metal, and this part that you mentioned as well, train, 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 train. I love that part as well. I think it's a bit.
Yeah.
Power metalish is lovely because it's actually it's the only part, or maybe not the only, but in all the darkness of the song is like a bit uplifting, maybe, no?
Yeah.
So about the guest, it's Thomas Vananen, or whatever this is pronounced, and he was then, or maybe not anymore, I'm not sure, the singer of Tyrfing. And Ville had mentioned him as one of his big influences, a great influence for him. So the part where he sings the first time there is the acoustic interlude, accordion, build up, and then that's him. His voice is a bit higher pitch, I would say, maybe.
You're not talking about like the climax of the slow build.
Yeah, there is a
that
climax.
Ends with a higher pitch.
Yeah. 1815. That one.
No way.
he is definitely somewhere, and I cannot think of any other part that can be someone else than Ville.
Wait, that is the guy from Tirfing?
I wouldn't bet my hand on it, but
I don't
95%.
think so.
Where?
Well, he's
I
somewhere
mean-
for sure. He is somewhere for
He is,
sure.
okay.
he is credited on the album, and I've always wondered where is he on the actual album, because
That's
I think that
he
is
is
him.
such a huge influence on Ville's vocals, so that's
That,
probably
okay.
why that they put
Yeah,
him
hard
on there.
to.
But
Even in interviews, they were joking that, can you tell who is who? Probably not.
Ton 10 tin. Editing in.
Well, I was so mistaken. So mistaken. That is not Thomas Van Anen, that is Ville. I asked Henry, and he confirmed, very convinced, no, that's Ville. And actually, where our dear guest appears is in the second song, in Tulena Yatuma. So, not even here. He said that maybe he did like little bits and pieces here and there, but the long segment where he added his vocals is in the second song. So you will have to wait until the next episode to hear about that. Sorry.
Tin 10 ton. Editing done.
Is it
oh right,
really
that
interesting.
would make sense, because
is it the voice at like 3 minutes? Like we have to talk about our sponsor NordVPN, or
That one.
No, it's actually really interesting because I love Ville's vocals, and I shamefully have never gotten around to listening to Tirfing.
What the fuck, man?
I know, so I can't tell. I don't know what that
Dude,
guy's voice sounds
I've
like.
seen him live so many times. Fuck.
Lucky you.
I honestly prefer the Thomas Van Hen than the newer singer. So-
I honestly, I can't decide which one I like the most, because I know the new singer and the old one I don't know, but I like them all equally, actually.
Well, I don't. What I was gonna say is I can tell why you would think that's not Ville, because I guess he doesn't really ever sound exactly like that on any other album or any other song.
Which part is that?
That the big climax at the big build at like
1815.
And
1815.
the first song, or?
the first
Yes,
song.
yes, we're in the first
Alright.
song, Mikkel. Yes.
yeah,
But the thing is that I've thought that was Ville for so long that to me, like, that's what Ville sounds like. So you're blowing my mind if that's not him.
tum 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 bah,
Yes.
Yeah.
tum tum
Think
tum.
you should- I don't know. We have to have Ville on. We have to ask him.
That just sounds like Ville, I would say.
It just sounds
Yeah, they
like
sound
him.
very similar. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fascinating.
No, yeah, actually,
of the-
before he screams, that could actually be the other guy. It could easily be that.
It's interesting that there's some. I mean, it's not as obvious as like Hitavainen on the violin. So you're like, oh, where's the
Yeah.
violin? Somewhere in here, there's that's super interesting.
But
Um,
but that's that part, like ta 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 dam, and with the cry just after, like the this really not loud but frank, honest,
Earnest.
screaming and sound and vocal.
mhm.
I think that sold me completely the album. Like, okay, I'm in. I'm like, I'm
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the big moments of Moonsorrow
yeah, and
ever.
I wrote something because for the first time since the beginning of this podcast, I wrote a lot of stuff. But I wrote the transition from the this moment towards the I mean, you have this very like black metal moment towards this calm moment around the same time. And for me, that's the moment where the conversation we had with the Henry really shine. Like, yes, we love Pink Floyd, we love Battery, we love a lot of stuff. We are making our own music, but nonetheless, you are mastering and mixing all your influences in a really amazing way. I have a new job in sound. I'm trying to mix my influences, and that's really, really hard. And on this album, they are doing it like really, really nice. It sounds like the Floyd, Battery, sometimes Moonsorrow. Don't ask me why. It's um, I mean the album is really besides being like depressive, we called that before, but it's really fluid. You correct me, Sasan, if that's not a real word, but word,
It's a
sorry.
word.
It flows. The album
Yeah.
flows every time. Um, for me, you don't have, and yes, there is like a distinction between first and second songs globally, but the album flows, and that's an amazing stuff.
I don't remember if I got a chance to ask this, but they mentioned when they were doing interviews for this album, why are the songs so long? Why are the songs so long? They said, we just sat down and we wrote the first song and it ended up being 30 minutes. And then we thought, okay, let's see if we can do it again. And I always wondered which song they wrote first. And to me, my guess, I don't remember if I got to ask this, but my guess is that they wrote this song first because this one has, as you're saying, Tomas, a very, everything flows and keeps going, and it feels like it wasn't so much a conscious decision for it to keep going, it just sort of happened. Whereas something like Tulamirsky feels like, okay, here's the end of the section, but let's add another section, which feels a lot more intentional.
And I don't want to narrow it particularly to Moonsorrow, but I'm listening to a lot of heavy and death metal stuff and other stuff, not so much black metal. This commitment to the flow is amazing. Like, I don't know any song during that long which is that great. And I love we talked about it at the beginning of the episode. I love Pink Floyd, Tangerine Dream, Alan Parsons. I was raised with that long stuff, proggy stuff. This one, it's just stupidly good in terms of we are going to stretch, not intentionally, but it will be a stretchy song, if I can say so. And everything will be perfectly in place, perfectly normal, and perfectly good. And that's just amazing. 30 minutes and it flows like 5 minutes.
If you take, for example, Thick as a Brick or a Passion Play, it's nothing compared to this. It's much more put up in sections, and a Passion Play, a Dark Passion Play or whatever it's called. It's just the fuck is this? I mean, they're just talking basically for 30 minutes with weird melodies in between, right? But Thick as a Brick is still very much made up into 7 different songs or something like that, right?
Right, or
You could also put, if you take a newer one like Insomnium's Winter Skate, which is like 45 minutes, I think. One album, one song. Super massive, amazing album, but there's definitely. I understand why they made a Spotify version, which was put into 7 parts in single songs, because that makes quite a lot of sense. But in this album, it just wouldn't make any sense to.
Well, maybe
anything.
if you try to cut it up, maybe you could. I mean, there are faster parts, slower parts, and
You
you
could
can.
probably, but it would
And-
it would be more like maybe an interlude or something in between 2 songs or something. I don't know.
I
Francesco.
agree. Sorry.
Maybe you could compare these 2 songs to Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells.
Yeah, that would
If
be
you want a
maybe a more
comparison.
maybe that would be maybe a more fitting one. Absolutely.
Even though it is also a well-structured song with some parts, and then they play the same melody with different instruments and so on. But I think
That's a
it
great
is a
record I
match.
grew up with as well.
You know, I like a lot more Omadon. It's the same concept, let's say, also very long, very well
No, I
structured and
didn't
everything. But
like.
really, but I find
I don't remember it very well, but I
Which
prefer
one?
Omadon, I think is the third one. And really,
Okay.
the climaxes in that one and really, there are some parts that are absolutely
Mike Oldfield,
magical to
or-
me. Yeah. Mike Oldfield,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So first he did
I've
the
never
Tubular
heard that
Bells, and
one.
the second one was Her Just Reached, which in my opinion is not that good. I mean, it's good, but some parts are a bit weaker. But then Omadon, the first Omadon, of course, because then he made
Yeah.
Return to Omadon a few years ago, which is also very good. But the first Omadon,
It's a-
I think, has these huge
It's a good
moments.
one, but first Samadon is.
Yeah.
I'm also in love with Michael Field. I'm a 26-year-old nerd.
Yeah, that one I really have to listen to then, I think. I've never heard about the Omadon one before, so.
But skip to it and just go straight to Alan Parsons Project.
anything else on this first song? We always joked when we were doing the other albums, like how long we would talk about one song, and be like, "Wow, we're gonna talk so long about just one song and have it's been like 2.5 hours."
Yeah.
Before
Whoops.
going to the second one, if you allow me, I just want to address the elephant in the room. We are talking from the beginning to avoid, but now I think it's time. Is the production of the
Oh, yeah.
of the album? So, Abel, there was a yeah. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about that, but we had before Kiven Kantaya, which is an amazing album in my opinion. The first one I discovered was Varjojen. The latest album is amazing in my opinion, but this one, I have a new work in video game sound design. I'm mixing all day long. I'm trying to have like balance and trying to have things sound the way they are supposed to sound. And this album is just a perfect balance between all the instruments. I think there is something really interesting. It's because you have these very long songs, like 2. You have they have at least the opportunity to build some very interesting mixing stuff, and the bass sound is amazing. I don't know what gear Ville is using, but it's amazing. The guitars sounds really, really great, and overall, everything sounds so nice in comparison to the weight of the feeling you're feeling. Sorry, it was
Yeah.
better in in French.
No. I totally agree. One thing I will say about the production of this album that is different than the albums after it is that the guitars sound thin on this album. Not in a bad way, but later on, like when you think of the way like Varjojen starts with the down, down, ba da down, it's like a way the guitars sound a lot heavier and fatter and stronger. And I think there's less room to do everything this album is doing and have the guitars sound like that, which is, I think, maybe why the later albums don't quite sound like this, is maybe because Henry wanted a more like guitar-driven sound. But yeah, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I would almost say that the two albums after this is in a sense a lot more in the depressive side of black metal, but it's not in this happy melancholic way that this album might be. It's put itself in some sort of a corner, but
Happy melancholic.
yeah, no, it's not Life Lover at all. It's not Life Lover.
No, but I know.
But compared to the other albums, this is something else, and I really enjoy where Jumalten Eike went, and I'm really looking forward to see what's the next part. Is it still gonna be in that same area as that one and the one previously, or is it gonna be something completely different? Who knows?
Because
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that I agree with you, and I mean, Moonsorrow albums sort of kind of follow a thread until it kind of reaches a masterpiece, and then it starts over and goes in a different direction. So if, you know, Kiven Kantaya was the ultimate folk metal Moonsorrow album, it feels like there's Verisa Ket, and then this is not even exactly, it's a lot less stripped down and naturey feeling, but it's feels like after this album they were like, okay, we're gonna set that aside for now and we're gonna do something else. And I'm also curious whether the next album is going to be continuing the sound of Jumalten Eike or starting completely over, but I think this feels kind of like the Kiven Kantaya of this sound. Like it was like, okay, we did this. This was amazing. We can't do a Hävitetty 2. Let's go somewhere else.
Oh, they can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it may sound a little bit stupid in my words, but for me, this album is the pinnacle of the subtlety in black metal. It's and not just for their discography. I really enjoy black metal in a general manner, and correct me if I'm wrong also. But I think this one brings you the best emotions with the best sound, with the best lines. And nothing is really neither harsh or cheap. Everything sounds legit and really yeah. I love that album. I think that's my take. I can just go back to sleep and See you soon in a few months. But
the new
See you in the
Lord
next
of the
one where
Rings,
we can actually talk about stuff that we might not like.
the new Lord of the Rings show is out, and I don't know if you guys watch it or
Yeah, like
have feelings on it.
half the season or something like that so far.
Okay.
I'm watching a channel. I think it's American, but Nerd of the Rings.
Oh, sure, but with the Amazon Lord of the Rings show, I'm big into Lord of the Rings. My girlfriend is huge into Lord of the Rings, and I don't know how you guys feel about it. At my house, we hate the show. We watch every
I
episode,
hate the show.
just so we have something to yell about, I guess. But when she said something the other day that really captured, I think, what I don't like about it, and it's that when you read Tolkien, you get this feeling that this person has put so much thought into this. Like every single detail has been thought about so much. And on the TV show, it just kind of feels like they didn't really put that much thought into anything. And I think, like, if being a nerd means anything, it's just putting a lot of thought into something. And the stuff that feels good to put a lot of thought into is the stuff that the person that made it put a lot of thought into, right? Like with Tolkien, you could be the biggest Lord of the Rings fan in the world. You're never going to put more thought into it than Tolkien did. He's spent his entire life working on that, right? And with this album and this song, you just get that sense. You just get that sense that, like, the people that made this put so much careful thought into this, and you get that same sort of feeling where it just feels good to, like, experience it and think about it and whatever, where, you know, it's not necessary for all music. There's a lot of great music that people didn't put any thought into it.
Oh,
Yeah, but the difference is it's not some sort of dumbed down version that's made to please the masses. Like you have Magvar, and then you have Uada and Keera from Portugal, and they basically just sound like a cheap version of Magvar without the same meaning of what Magvar used to be, right? And
Yeah.
and it's the same. I mean, so far I actually like Rings of Power, but that's probably only because I started watching House of the Dragon before, and I cannot stand that shit. It's so fucking bad. So it's less worse than the shit. So therefore it's okay, right?
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It's so fucking dumbed down. It's incredible.
I wanted to come back to the Moonsorrow album again.
Oh yeah.
Just if I can make a transition from the first song to the second song.
No.
Before that, can we just quickly admire the Burzum keyboards in the first song?
Yes.
You mean
Okay.
the ones that sound like drips? Book.
Yeah. Dunkelheit.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Mikkel. I'm again watching my notes. For me, they mastered all the influences they had. Like we talked with Henry a couple of months ago. We talked about black metal, Pink Floyd, and stuff like that. This album is the perfect mix of everything Henry talked with us in a single shell. That's amazing. And that's great.
And I still like the second song better. Isn't that amazing?
And that has been Francesco's version of a Varjojen virta theme. Alright, before we finish, I only want to say one more thing, which is that Google Podcasts is disappearing soon. Google is famous for killing its own products, and this is the next victim. However, it's been replaced by YouTube Music. YouTube Music works like Spotify, very similar, and now it also has a podcast function. Honestly, this is making my life easier because, as you know, we already have a YouTube channel. I was already uploading the episodes there, but now it will be automatic, which means I don't have to create the video with a still image, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, simply, if you were subscribed on Google Podcasts, go to YouTube, find our channel, which is Moonsorrow Podcast, and you will see several tabs, and now there is a new tab, which is Podcast. And yeah, you will find our feed there. So enjoy! Thank you for listening, and see you on the next one, which will be Tulenäijät Tumaa.